When you're on your right path and you have passion for what it is that you do, that the universe conspires with you because you're aligned with source energy. You become part of the creative process. And the creative process is God consciousness. And when you're in God consciousness, the universe will just send you the right people. And I mean, that isn't like something that you can just sort of bank on, except that after a while you do. And you just sort of get a knowing, and you have an awareness that I'm on the right path, and this is what I'm doing, and my heart tells me this is my calling. I wrote a book recently called Inspiration, Your Ultimate Calling. Inspiration, it breaks down to in spirit. Your calling is a spiritual calling. And when you feel that, and you feel called by it, then, you know, there's that old saying that when the student is ready, the teachers will appear. The teachers are everywhere. They might be sitting right next to you. It might be this room. That might be this little talk that I'm giving to you here this morning. You don't know. I mean, I really don't know how to talk about writing, because writing isn't something that I do. Writing is something that I am. And the words I am, if you come to my talk tonight, I'm sure many of you will be there, the words I am are really the name of God. God's words to Moses when he asked, what is your name? He said, my name is I am that I am. So every time you use the words I am, you're using the name of God. And writing and who I am, and it's a spiritual thing for me. But Reed asked me to speak to you about the earlier days of writing. I wrote my first book when I was 16. It was terrible. It was called The Anomalous Compatriot. Most of us don't even know what the word means. And when I was in the service, I was in the Navy for 4 years. I wrote about 600 or 700 essays about everything that I could, everything that I could think about. I was almost court-martialed when I was in the Navy and threatened, because I was on Guam, and they had a policy in the Navy that if you were a civilian there on Guam, you could shop in the Navy exchanges where the prices were seriously reduced. But if you were Guamanian, which meant that you had brown skin, you weren't allowed. This was 1961. And the Guam Daily News invited an invitation to speak your mind, it was called, on the back page of the paper, and they had a contest, and the first prize was $75. So I entered the contest and won it, which I knew I would. And they published my picture in the Guam Daily News back in 1961, and the commander of the naval forces in the Marianas Islands threatened me with a court-martial because I had violated the chain of command. I hadn't gotten permission to say something about the Navy policy without going through the chain. Well, if I had gone through the chain, I wouldn't have been able to publish it, and we wouldn't be able to get the policy changed. So Joseph Heller wrote a whole book about that called Catch-22. So they called me in and they threatened to have me court-martialed. And that's when I just took my writing, and I wrote a letter to President Kennedy. I wrote a letter to the Detroit Free Press. I wrote a letter to the Detroit News, and showed him the letters. I hadn't sent them, and said, this is going to be, this, because President Kennedy was very big on civil rights and changing things. He was the first president to really, he and his brother, Bobby Kennedy, whose son I was just with up in Rhinebeck last week, were very instrumental in changing a lot of it. I mean, when I was in the Navy, the Navy was segregated. Basically, the black sailors were stewards, and even the ones that were doing the kind of work that I was doing had separate quarters. I walked into a restaurant in Maryland, and I had with my friend Ray Dudley, Rayford Secundus Dudley, who was from Chicago. We were both in the uniform of the United States Navy in Maryland, Havre de Grace, Maryland. And we were not allowed to eat there because Ray was black. That's not very long ago. I wrote a letter about that to the Chief of Naval Operations, and sort of used my writing as a way of expressing who I am. And having, and we got the policy changed. They saw that I really meant who I was, and I was just a young 21-year-old second-class petty officer in the Navy. But before I left there in June of 1961, they had changed that policy. And they withdrew any charges and gave me an early discharge, which was the nicest thing I could have ever had. And then got out at the age of 22 and went to the university and got my PhD after 8 years, and started writing. I was writing articles and essays. I had a whole series of almost 700 essays that I had written on every subject that you could imagine. And I was also a voracious reader, which is the way I think you learn how to write, by reading. Listen to Herman Melville in Moby Dick. For as this appalling ocean surrounds the verdant land, you hear the image? So in the soul of man lies one insular Tahiti, full of peace and joy, but encompassed by all of the horrors of the half-lived life. I memorized that when I was a teenager because writing just doesn't get much better than that with the imagery and so on. And you get to be a great writer by being a great reader, I think. And I wanted to write something. I was writing textbooks. I had written 3 textbooks plus a doctoral dissertation, which is another book. And I came upon this idea of writing a sort of a common sense approach to how to manage your life. And my feelings at that time in my early 30s was that people's lives were out of control because they just didn't use common sense. I often say that my success in writing about psychology wasn't because of my training. It was in spite of it. Because I was trained to be a Jungian analyst for a while, and I was trained to get people to go back into their past and examine the kinds of struggles and traumas that they had gone through and overcome them, and then somehow the present will become better if you resolve these things. And it just didn't make sense to me. It just, I lived in an orphanage. I knew how to get along in life. I knew how to rely upon myself. And self-reliance was the theme of your erroneous zones. And I would write about that. And I was teaching, I was a professor at a university in New York, St. John's University. And my lectures were all based on what I was going to write. And I wanted to write a book that would reach people. And so and a big theme of my life, and I've just done a new public television special that will be airing in March. And it's based on the new book that will be coming out, which will be a mind blower. This new book, Wishes Fulfilled. It's going to revolutionize the way people think about who they are, and also about their relationship to God. As you'll hear tonight, if you're there tonight. Are you coming tonight? Most of you coming tonight? Okay. So you'll hear me talk about that tonight. But it's so. Here's the theme. If you want to accomplish something, anything, you must first expect it of yourself. And I mean, if you're writing anything down or if you're tattooing anything to the inner forehead of yours that you can remind yourself of, ask yourself, what do you expect of yourself? You know? And do you expect to be ordinary or do you expect to be extraordinary? Because you've been raised to be ordinary, which isn't bad. Because to get to extraordinary, I think of myself as an extraordinary person, and I have extraordinary accomplishments, but my life is very ordinary in many ways. I mean, I have to fill out the forms just like you do, and I have to stop at red lights, and I have 8 kids, all of who, you know, have all of their issues, and I have to obey the rules and get along, and I will die too. You know, I mean, it's like, and I have grandchildren and children that are, you know, that I've devoted my life to being this ordinary. But extraordinary encompasses all of ordinary. And then it's the gap between ordinary and extraordinary where I'm speaking to you right now. It's saying, okay, I have filled out the forms, and I've taken care of business, and I've taken care of my family, and I've filled out all of the things that I'm supposed to do, and I'm a good person, a good citizen, and but it's just not enough. Not if you're coming from and I assume that, you know, you wouldn't sign up for something like this, spend the money. Do you pay for this? Do you actually pay to hear Reed? That hard to believe. Maybe you're beyond help. I don't know. And you wouldn't come and spend a whole day, and you wouldn't be here if you didn't have a vision or an expectation for yourself. But even as you have an expectation for yourself as a writer, do you have an extraordinary expectation for yourself as a writer, or do you have an ordinary one? And you can always look at that concept of moving into exalted levels. See, what has always fascinated me is people who live at extraordinary levels of awareness. I'm right now reading the biography of Stephen Jobs. Jobs. I don't know why I call him Jobs, but I mean, it wasn't the book of Jobs. I don't know. And as weird as he is, and you look at his history, and if you think his is weird, if you knew mine, I've wallowed around in the depths of struggle and weirdness, and I've listened to my own inner voices, and a lot of times they take me in a very different direction than they take other people. But extraordinary consciousness is, and I was deeply and profoundly moved by a man named Abraham Maslow when I was a doctoral student, and sought him out, and he talked about self-actualizing people as people who live at a different level of awareness, who have a different set of values. And I was so intrigued by his teachings when I read an essay called The Whole Man, a 57-page essay about what these people are like, that he called self-actualizers. And I've written about it myself. I wrote a whole book based on that, about how to raise children on it, called What Do You Really Want for Your Children? I wrote a book called The Sky's the Limit, which was based upon how to apply that sort of self-actualizing theories in our own life. And I've lived by it my whole life. So when I published Your Erroneous Zones, and the interesting thing about Erroneous Zones, which is a book that today has, I'm not sure really, but it's in the neighborhood of 60 million copies out there in 47 languages. I mean, it's in like 5 different languages in India alone. I mean, it's in Chinese and a lot of the countries that it was banned in when it was published, all the communist countries, we had to smuggle the books in. Or now it's published in Belarus and Polish and Bulgarian and so on. And my vision for myself and for this, especially for this book, was all revolved around this idea of writing from a place of where my heart was. I wrote Erroneous Zones from my heart, and speak to you about it now from my heart. And when I finished publishing it, and I went to the publisher, I had an agent, and one of the things I believe is that when you're on your right path and you have passion for what it is that you do, that the universe conspires with you because you're aligned with source energy. You become part of the creative process. And the creative process is God consciousness. And when you're in God consciousness, the universe will just send you the right people. And I mean, that isn't like something that you can just sort of bank on, except that after a while you do. And you just sort of get a knowing, and you have an awareness that I'm on the right path, and this is what I'm doing, and my heart tells me this is my calling. I wrote a book recently called Inspiration, Your Ultimate Calling. Inspiration, it breaks down to in spirit. Your calling is a spiritual calling. And when you feel that, and you feel called by it, then, you know, there's that old saying that when the student is ready, the teachers will appear. The teachers are everywhere. They might be sitting right next to you. It might be this room. That might be this little talk that I'm giving to you here this morning. You don't know. I mean, but I just read something by Mary Oliver. Anybody in the room know who Mary Oliver is? Let me see. Yeah. She's a very famous poet who lives out on Cape Cod. And they ask her, what's your formula for success? She's 71 years, my age, 71 years old. And she said three things. She said, one, pay attention. Just pay attention. Two, be astonished. You know, live from a place of bewilderment. And three, tell other people, which is what you're here for, to tell other people. Just do that, she said, and pay attention. And notice when the right things come up and when the right people, and get your ego out of it. So let me tell you the story of how Erroneous Zones was published. And then I'll tell you what I did with it, and then I'll take a few questions. And Reed, you tell me when to stop.
Yeah,
so,
no
problem. I was lecturing at St. John. I was a professor, associate professor at St. John's University in Queens. And all the years that I was a graduate student, which was a lot, 8 years of college after the Navy, I would sit in a classroom and I would always be astonished at how bad the lecturers were, how bad the teachers were, the professors were. Not about how that they didn't know their business. They knew their stuff. I was at the University of Michigan, and I was at Wayne. These were very good schools at Wayne State University, but they were just bad. They would look out, and their audience would be bored, and they would be. And I can remember sitting there in my 20s and thinking, when I am on stage, not if I am on stage, because I knew that I would be on stage. Because I'd already spent 4 years in the Navy, and I was giving lectures on philosophy, epistemology, things like that over there on Guam. I mean, I was a very different kind of sailor than they had to encounter. And I can remember vowing that because I just knew I was going to become a school teacher. You know, and I started out just as a high school teacher. I knew that when I taught classes, my classes were going to be entertaining and compelling and interesting and fascinating and exciting, and I wasn't going to read to them from my notes, and I was going to, come there and just entertain and get people to want to hear more. I mean, I feel that way right now. I just feel like, right here in this room. I watch my audience. Are you paying attention? Are you interested? And if you're not, I'll go off into another area. I'll tell a joke or make it funny or tell a story, whatever it might be. But do you remember that when you were in college and high school? How bad these teachers were? Just at not bad at teaching necessarily, but bad at just communicating, just making it fun. I mean, who are the teachers? Who was your favorite teacher? What was the, you can, I'm sure every one of you have a favorite teacher, and you can, that was the person that made you laugh, that was interested in you, that could make it come alive, right? And the endless, boring lectures that you went to, that you, so I made up my mind that that was what I was going to be. So when I took this position as a professor at St. John's University, I made my classes come alive. It didn't matter what I would. Sometimes I taught tests and measurement. You know, like, how do you make tests and measurement come alive? And, first time I went in there, I told everybody that this is all graduate students. I said that everybody in this room, I'm going to give a test next week. It's an IQ test, and your grade will be determined about how well you do on this. And I had them totally convinced that their whole life and whether they were going to go on in graduate school was dependent upon how they did on this test. I scared the shit out of them. I mean, it was like, and I said to them, as I passed out the test, you know, and it was, I said, this is what you do to your students all the time with these tests that you're making them take. And so, do you see the anxiety? Do you see the stress? And I taught tests and measurements from the perspective of intelligence tests measure how well you take intelligence tests. That's all they measure. They don't measure anything else. And they aren't predictive of anything. Anyway, so I would make it come alive. And they would walk out and I'd say, yeah, you don't have to worry about that. You're going to pass this course. You just have to. Because my lectures started, and I would use a lot of humor, and sometimes it was salacious, and sometimes it was, you know, and I thought of myself as sort of a frustrated comedian, so there was a lot of laughter and having a lot of fun. And before you know it, people would say, you got to come to this guy Dyer, come to his class. And I actually had the dean come to me and complain that all of the parking places at the university were being taken up by non-students who were coming to your class, because I would have 40 students in my class and there'd be like 100 people there, or sometimes 200-300 people there, because it was just like an event. I would make 2.5 hours of just fun, and I recorded everything, and it was all my preparation for your erroneous sounds. I would do a week on guilt. I'd do a whole lecture on guilt, and I would do one on fear of the unknown, and all the things that became your erroneous zones. And there was a woman in the class who encouraged me to come out to a place at the Educational Assistance Center in Port Washington, New York, and to give a lecture there on Monday night. I had Monday nights free. And so I had people come out. They signed up for $20 for 4 lectures. $4 or $5 lectures, Monday night for 2 hours. I recorded everything, all right? And in that, one of those classes, so after 4 weeks, the class, I said, how many would like to extend it for 4 weeks? Not only would they extend it, but they would bring more people. The next class, we had 20 in the first class. The second class, we had 80 people, and we were overflowing. 3 years later, at Schreiber High School in Port Washington, New York, we had 1,200 people every Monday night paying $20 a lecture, and I was going home with paper bags full of money that I didn't even know what to do with. It's true. Big shopping bags filled with $20 bills and so on. So in the audience there one night was a woman named Harriet Pine, and Harriet saw some kind of potential. Her husband was Artie Pine, and he was a literary agent in New York, someone that who has passed on now, but Reed knows, or knew, and his son took it over. And he sent me a letter and asked, and now I had written all these notes on your erroneous sounds and given all these lectures on erroneous sounds, and I had Artie called me up and he said, would you be interested in, my wife tells me something, would you be interested in doing a book on what you're writing about? And I was so excited. I thought, this is like, pay attention. When the student is ready, they'll happen, they'll show up. The problem is that they're always there, you just don't notice them, because we don't go through life paying attention. We don't notice the room, we don't notice everything, we just don't pay attention. So I sent him an outline and a sample chapter, and he made an appointment with a guy named Paul Farges. I don't know if you ever, did you know Paul?
No.
No? He was the head of a company at that time called T.Y. Crowell Publishers. And Funk and Wagnalls was a division of T.Y. Crowell. So I went for this meeting in the city, in Manhattan, met Paul, and as I sat down with Paul at his desk, he looked like he was so sad and so depressed. I was a therapist, and I looked at him. I said, "What is going on with you?" He's a man in his 30s, and he said, "Well, you're not here to talk about me." He said, "You're here to talk about your book. Tell me about it." I said, "No, I don't want to talk about my book." I said, "We can do that anytime." I said, "What's going on with you?" And this is a big part of this whole story because it's like I got my attention off of myself. I was hearing Cheryl talking about whether your picture is going to be on something and, you know, me, what's in it for me? And you really need to get out of that consciousness and shift out of the ego and into the world of spirit, where your motivation for writing is to serve, you know, to reach, to assist, not to make money, not to, I'm hearing you talk about getting self-published and all of that, but by and large, if your energy isn't on just improving the quality of life for someone, whatever kind of book that you're writing, then it's very likely that you're not going to reach the levels. It's like Thoreau's definition of success was the best ever. If you advance confidently in the direction of your own dreams and endeavor to live the life which you have imagined, you will meet with a success unexpected in common hours. It will chase you. That's a hard one for so many people because we're so determined that we're the ones who are going to do it. At any rate, I sat there and talked to Paul. He said, he said, if you really want to know, he said, my wife last night, we have 2 children, ages 6 and 9 or something, and he said, my wife last night told me that she wants to get a divorce, that she's seeing someone else. She's not in love with me anymore. And he started sobbing, tears rolling down his face. And he said, and we sat there for 4 hours. And I did therapy with him, if you want to call it therapy. I talked to him, gave him what my advice was, what I would do, how you could handle this, how you have to understand that sometimes these things that come into our life are the greatest gifts that we've ever been given. It's hard for you to see now. And the truth of it is he's remarried now and so on after many years. But and then I left and we never got around to my book. And Artie called me that night. He said, well, how did it go? And I said, we never talked about my book. And the next day, Artie called and said, you've got a contract. He said, Paul said to me, I don't care what this man writes. I want him with us. That's a true story. And, yeah. Thanks. I had all these lectures that I had been giving at the university that I had been taping, and I went away and I wrote the whole thing after another experience in finding my father, and it's another story altogether. Push that one over there. And I went and I wrote the whole thing out. I sent the manuscript into them. We went through the process, and the book was published. The title was sent to me by a former student of mine named Susan Foti, Sue Foti. And I had just asked, as I had asked everyone, I'm writing this book. It's about common sense. It's about the mistakes that we make. It's the mistakes in thinking. It's about the errors in the way that we think. And she said, it's about errors in the way you think? I said, yeah. She said, what about erroneous ones? And so we submitted it, and people thought they were getting a sex book. It's true. I went into a bookstore in Des Moines, Iowa, and there was my face on a book right next to Debbie Does Dallas, and and the pizza man always delivers. It's true. I looked at it, I said, there's my smiling face up there. The guy who looked at it said, well, this must be where this goes. So so now I've got a book. Now, I was selling a lot of books because I still had this thing going over in Port Washington. First night it came out, I think I sold like 1,000 copies. We just had it over there, and People magazine later came and did a story of me, and they saw me, taking in the $20 bills, but it was, at that time, it was $7 for the book, and $6.95 in hardcover is what the book was. But I was selling books at the place and so on. But you see, if you want to accomplish something, you must expect it of yourself. And it wasn't that I wanted to have a bestseller. It wasn't that I wanted to make a lot of money. It never occurred to me. That was just, that's all stuff that came after me. It's all stuff that chased me. I just loved what I did so much. And I loved this book so much. And I felt that it had really a lot to offer, and people were reading it and saying, wow, this really means something. I find out now that about something like 800 universities and community colleges were using Your Erroneous Zones, and still do, as textbooks in their classes and so on. And people are touched by that book, and it's just, all it is a book about common sense and how not to allow other people's opinions to rule your life, and how to live in the present and not be filled with guilt, and how to love yourself, and how to get rid of jealousy and anger and fear and worry and stuff that people just are so immobilized by. And I just boiled it all down to it's just a mistake in the way you think. So I just had such a different vision for myself, and I was so excited about it that I started doing, there's a guy in New York City, his name was Long John Nebel. Any New Yorkers here? Remember that name? Remember Long John Nebel? Anybody? No? You do back there? People way in the back are so old. He was married to Candy Jones, who also had written a book on... anyway, he had a radio station and a radio show on WMCA, I think it is, a big, and WOR. And he was on all night long, from midnight till... And he had prostate cancer. And he had to sit on one of those like inner tube things because he had had surgery and so on. And he would have me come in, and I would sit there and talk to him, but he had to get up and walk around, and he would leave. Sometimes he'd leave for like a whole hour and just walk around. Literally, he would, and I would just do the show, because very few commercials late at night on that. And the next day, you couldn't find my book anywhere, and I just kept coming back and doing that and doing radio shows, and it got so exciting. And I contacted every radio show. The first radio station I ever did was in West Babylon, New York, WBAL, some little 15-minute radio show. So I would call the publisher and find out, always want to know, how's the book doing? How's the book doing? And they'd say, well, they had what we call a list mentality. 3 months it'll be on this list, and then we'll go on to the next list of books and so on. But I didn't have that expectation for myself. I had an expectation, this was too good to just be out there for 3 months and then to be put on the back shelf and become something that people forget about. So I said, when are you going to print a second printing? And they said, well, we have to sell the first printing first, and you're very unknown, nobody knows who you are. So I called up Albany, and I became a bookstore. Albany is the state capital of New York, and I gave them a little license number and paid $10, I think, and got a license to be a business, a Wayne Dyer bookstore, and I ordered all the rest of the first printing. I did. And I had them shipped to the garage in the house that I was living out in West Babylon at that time. And then, I called them up, and the guy's name was Lou. And Lou, I said, so just check on how the first printing is doing. He said, look, you were just called last week. I said, yeah, but maybe and he said, all right, okay. And he called, he said, holy shit. He said, this book is selling. He said, we're going to have to do a second printing. I said, okay. So they did a second printing. First printing, I think, was 2,500 books. Second printing, I think, was like 3,500 books. And I ordered those too. I bought those up as well. All 3,500. And then I ordered the third printing, and I bought those up. So I had about 9,000 or 10,000 books. in the garage. I did. And And I was selling them at the high school where I was teaching, and I was doing a few talks around Long Island and so on. And then I decided in 1976, when my daughter Tracy, who you'll see tonight, she was 9 years old, and so I talked to her and I said, we're going across the country. And because I had a publicist that I hired, her name was Donna Gould, and I said to Donna, you know, my publisher tells me, Lou tells me, and Artie tells me that the only way to reach everybody in the country is to get on Phil Donahue. And if you can't get on Phil Donahue's show, then you've got to get on The Tonight Show. And if you can't get on The Tonight Show, you've got to, you know, do the Mike Douglas show. And if you can't get Mike Douglas, you know, there was all these different shows that were on there. And that's the only way you can reach everybody. At that time, those were the only syndicated shows. And I said, well, Donna would call them and call them and call them, send them books. And finally, they just said, look, we don't even want to hear the name Wayne Dyer again. So I just made the decision that there's another way to reach everybody in America. It takes a little longer. It's not quite as easy as going on Oprah, as Cheryl did. So I packed all of these books in my car and began to distribute them myself. And I would go I couldn't get in on any markets in the large cities, but if you go to a small city, like instead of going to Cincinnati, you could go to Columbus. And in Columbus, they'll put you on the radio if you've got a new avocado dip. You know, it's like, they got to, and I literally would go and find out. There was Little Professor. Do they still have Little Professor bookstores?
No.
No? Well, they did at that time. And I would go to the Little Professor bookstore, and I would go in, it's absolutely true, and I would ask them if they would put my book in their stores and on consignment. And if you sell them, you can pay for them. If you don't, just ship them back, and I'll pay the cost. And then I would have my wife at the time, and she would call. She was really good at different accents, and when I was on the radio, she would call these bookstores using the accent. When I think about what I did now, it's like, I don't know if this is even legal. But she would do it in a Swedish accent, and then she'd do it in a German accent, and then she'd do it in a French. She spoke French. She spoke like 5 languages, and she would call these different bookstores. Aronius, some kind of zones. This man's talking. What is this book? I must have this book. And then the next day, I would go back to all of these bookstores. There were like 4 or 5 of them, and Columbus was one of the cities I did this in. And I'd say, how are you doing? And they'd say, oh my God, we've had so many calls. Can you leave us some more books? It's a true story. And they would be getting calls as well. And then I would move on to the next city and to the next city. And then we went all the way across the country. We spent like 4 or 5 months going across the country. And then a friend of mine named Howard, who's now a friend of mine, named Howard Papish, was in New York, and he had heard on one of the radio shows that I was doing in New York, because I was on the radio every day. I would book myself on all of these. You know, New York City has so many radio stations, and each little community has a radio station, and I would go on there any opportunity that I had to talk about it, and I never thought about selling books. I mean, it wasn't like I'm going to make money and all that. I just really wanted people. I don't know, I was just basking in the fun and the joy of how exciting all of this was. I met this little short, heavy-set black woman in Baltimore named Oprah Winfrey, who was 22 years old, I think, doing a show called People Are Talking. And she just took a liking to me, and I did her show in Baltimore every time they had a ratings period, February, she would call, and this is my favorite author in the world, and and she would invite me to come over and have dinner with her, and it was like it was a very interesting time. But I'll just tell you this one story, and then we'll take a few questions. So Howard called me, and he was at a party out on Long Island. What's that Tony place out on Long Island, the real fancy? The Hamptons, yeah. He was at some kind of a party out there at the Hamptons. And somebody there at the party was talking about this book with a weird title called Your Erroneous Zones. And they gave it to him, they handed it to him. And they said to him, read this book. And someone else had handed him another book. And so he had these two books. And he got on a plane to fly, and he was the talent coordinator for The Tonight Show. And so he got on the plane, and he had to decide between reading this one that woman was raving about and another book. It was a book about being hit by lightning, I think, and having your guts ripped out of you. So I think Cheryl Richardson wrote it, I think. I don't know. Anyway, so he picked erroneous sounds. When you advance confidently in the direction of your own dreams, when you have an expectation for yourself. So he read, all the way out to Los Angeles, he read this book, and he's a gay man who has come out since then, but he was married at the time to a woman, and he was like in deep struggle with this whole thing about. It's interesting because I just saw the most fabulous movie that was made in 2004. I bought it just yesterday. I want to see it again and again. It's called De Lovely. If you haven't seen it, watch it. It's the story of Cole Porter, who was a gay man in a marriage. And it just hit me that it was such a beautiful, beautiful film, and some of the greatest music ever written by this man in his turmoil. But anyway, so Howard read the book, and he was so taken by it that he went to Johnny Carson. Now, I had had no national publicity at all. I had only been doing these local shows in all the different. Instead of going to Seattle, I would go to Tacoma, and in Tacoma, somebody would know somebody in Seattle, and my daughter and I and my wife, we spent months and months and months just on the road, distributing books, having them shipped, and so on. Then Howard reads the manuscript, goes to Johnny Carson and said, this guy, he's just really got something here. Would you be interested in having him on the show? With Freddie DeCordova, who was the producer of the show. And they said, well, have him come out and we'll do a pre-interview with him. So they flew me out there on a Wednesday, and I flew out. By this time I was back in Michigan, and they called. Howard called me and said, "We'll fly you out there if you'd like to do a pre-interview." So I went in there and I did the pre-interview, and then I flew back. And the next day, they called me and they said, "Johnny said that he would like to have you. He'll have you on the show." And this is the biggest break there ever was, you know. So I went out there, and instead of being on with Johnny, I was on a Monday night, the following Monday night, I was on with a guy named Shecky Green, who's a Las Vegas comedian. And Shecky and I got on the show, and we just hit it off. I was kibitzing with him, having fun with him, you know. We did a little arm wrestling thing, and we were talking. It was just, he's a very funny, funny man. And at that time, Johnny didn't really host the show. He didn't do the show on Monday or Tuesday. He was only doing it 3 days.
And the affirmation for this principle of manifestation is, I deserve to experience divine abundance, for I am a part of God. And of course, the universe is abundant. It is endless. This intelligence that I've been speaking about is endless and abundant. And you, therefore, also are abundant and are deserving of that abundance. But there's a lot of stuff that has come your way that has worked to convince you that this isn't true. And what I want to do here in this principle is to help you to recognize not only your own divinity, but that whatever comes your way, you are entitled to. And that there's nothing selfish about having a desire. This idea that somehow there's an incompatibility with desiring abundance in your life, or desiring healing, or desiring anything in your life. You know, you can't create without a desire. You can't have anything without a desire. Even the desire to be desireless is a desire. And this idea that we don't have desires is really it's a hallucination. It's a myth that somehow I shouldn't be wanting things. You are a part of the endlessness and the abundance of this divine universe. And you are not incompatible with prosperity and joy and wealth and fulfillment. This is something that you not only can ask for, but are entitled to. And you must know that. Someone mailed this to me that I thought I'd share this with you. It's called I Am Lost. It says, a woman is dying of AIDS. A priest is summoned. He attempts to comfort her, but to no avail. I am lost, she said. I have ruined my life and every life around me. Now I'm going painfully to hell. There's no hope for me. The priest saw a framed picture of a pretty girl on the dresser. Who is this, he asked. The woman brightened. She is my daughter, the one beautiful thing in my life. And would you help her if she was in trouble or made a mistake? Would you forgive her? Would you still love her? Of course I would, cried the woman. I would do anything for her. Why do you ask such a question? Because I want you to know, said the priest, that God has a picture of you on his dresser. And I think that picturing ourselves this way, with all of the problems that we have had, the things that we feel bad about, the mistakes that we may have made, the people that we may have hurt, all of these kinds of things have a tendency to make us feel unworthy. There's a lot of people who think, I'm going to be able to manifest what I want in my life as soon as I am no longer an addict, or as soon as I am no longer fat, or as soon as I remove all of these problems I have in this relationship. When I get rid of all of this, when this all goes, then I will feel worthy. And it's almost like you have to shift that consciousness around and come at it from a different perspective, which says, I love myself while I am fat. I love myself while I'm an addict. I love myself regardless of what it is that I may have seen as something that I shouldn't be. That God does have a picture of me on his dresser, is the metaphor as well. And what it does is it fills you with this kind of unconditional love that I'll be talking about a little bit later in one of the later principles. But you begin to say, yes, I am worthy. And I'll tell you when you feel most worthy of what it is that you would like to be able to manifest. You see, if you feel unworthy, what you do is you block the flow. And remember, there's an energy. There's a flowing of energy in everything. That's what manifesting is. And the idea that somehow I shouldn't have this or there's something wrong with it, that immediately puts you into a feeling or a space of being separate from this thing that you want to manifest. It's like you put up that blockage. Someone asked the question, does God have this for me? Does God want that for me? And almost always when we ask that question, we make an assumption. We're coming from that ego assumption that God and I are separate. And the same thing is true when you're feeling unworthy. What you're really saying is that God has made a mistake here. And there are no mistakes. And this divine intelligence is everywhere. And it's a theme that will run through this entire program. This idea that what I want to manifest has the same divine intelligence in it that is in me and that is in everything. So I'm realigning myself. But you can't realign yourself if you feel like what you would like to have come to you, that you aren't worthy of it. You have to know that you are as worthy of anything showing up in your life as anyone else is on the planet. The essence of this is that you have to be at peace. And being at peace is what enlightenment is. As my teacher told me, enlightenment is being immersed in and surrounded by peace. That's the definition of enlightenment. And it is also what the higher intelligence or the sacred part of you or the higher self always wants. It just wants you to be at peace. Nothing else. It's not asking any more. When you feel unworthy, you're not at peace. The ego has taken over this idea somehow that you have certain obligations, you have to behave in certain ways, you have to fulfill the obligations of your conditioning or of the tribe. That's what starts to take over, and you've got to let go of that.
I think we show up here with a mission. We have tasks, we have lessons, we have things that we have to do while we're here. And for some of us, that's a very short time. And for some, it's a very long time. And some people will have 30 years experience. And some people will have 1 year experience 30 times. Two different approaches. Endlessly keep repeating the same thing over again, and others are growing. It's not the same for anybody. I just talked to somebody just the other day who's got 29 years working at a plant in Indiana. His real love is he has an apple orchard. He has 290 trees. He knew so much about apples and about all the different kinds of apples and all the controversy about pesticides and why they have to be used and which ones are safe and which ones aren't and how much water that you have to give them and why you just let nature do it in a certain way and where you plant them and when you harvest them. And he had this whole thing he had discovered about how to keep apples for 6 months by putting them in your refrigerator and keeping them cool, but you've got to keep moisture in there. He said the moisture goes out, and he was so excited about his apples. And yet he spends 99% of his life doing something that he doesn't like doing. I said, your bliss is your apples, isn't it? And your apple orchard. Oh, he said, I love it when I'm out there with that. I just feel like I'm with God at that time. I said, is there any way to make this so you don't have to do this other stuff? So that you don't have to spend your life in this sort of inauthentic way where you're always thinking about how much you dislike what you're doing? Well, I've never thought about really making a living at it and all of that. I said, somebody's got to buy apples, and there's applesauce that's got to be made, and there's apple pies that have got to be made, and it's like if you get your bliss, if you know what it is, then it's just a matter of taking some of the risks that go with it. And why not? Why restrict yourself in any way? What I was suggesting to him was like, give yourself a chance at that. There's two things that I think about what you're doing. You've got to love what you do, and you got to do what you love. Everybody can do this. And I don't really think it matters too much what you're doing. But if you don't like it, you have options. The first option that you have is that you can leave it and take the risk that goes with following your bliss. And I know what your question is already. How do I know what my bliss is? And I'll come to that. So what you do know is what it isn't. We always know what it isn't. For sure. That's no problem. But you can leave what you're doing. That's number one. Or you can change around your thoughts about what it is that you're doing. You have that option. You can decide that if you just are not willing to take the risk, or you have to stay with this or whatever, that I can change my thoughts toward it. And I can make it as creative and do all kinds of things with it and say, all right, I'm only going to do this for 6 hours or 8 hours in a day, and then I'm going to get right out into my apple orchards. And this is sort of what this fellow was doing, was learning how to go into this assembly line job that he had and do it and not have such a negative, terrible attitude about it and have fun with it and make it blissful. So you can change. There's risks involved with all of that for some people. I think that the risks are much less than most of us realize. They're not really risks at all after a while. They're just like adventures and their excitement. And the people who really love you and support you in your life will support you trying new things. But how do you find your bliss then? To come back to that question. The answer to that is you don't. You have to let your bliss find you. And your bliss can't find you. It sounds strange, but your bliss cannot find you. It's like your purpose. It cannot find you as long as you're filled up or clogged up with something else. Here's a wonderful story. There was an expert on Buddhism and Far Eastern religions, and he was a professor at a university. He had written 4 or 5 books on the subject, and he was really considered a true expert. But he had always wanted to meet a particular Zen saint who lived in India, up near Nepal. And so he traveled there with all of his books. He wanted to meet this particular Zen saint, a guru. He had made an appointment, and he introduced himself, and the man had just like a loincloth on, and he was very simple, very peaceful, very old, so you get the picture. And the expert began talking to him about all the things that he knew about Zen and Buddhism and so on. And the master stopped him and said, would you like a cup of tea? And he said, yes, that would be very nice. He took a teacup and he put it in a saucer, and the man continued to talk about all of the things that he knew about. And the master picked up the tea and he began to pour it into the cup. And the man continued talking, and then the cup was full, and the master continued to pour. And the tea poured out of the cup and onto the saucer, and as the man talked, he still kept pouring. And the tea was now going onto the floor and onto the man's pants, and finally, he stopped him and he said, excuse me, but the cup is full. You're pouring, and it's full. And the master stopped him and said, you are like the cup. He said, you are so full of everything that you know that you don't have room to let anything else new in. And so many of us are just like that teacup. We're so full of all of the stuff that we have learned that there's no more room to let anything else in. It's just all pouring out and just going past us and all outside of us. Now, if you can see that metaphor in yourself, you can begin to see that in the eyes of the beginner, there are millions of options. In the eyes of the expert, there are only one or two. So the suggestion to finding your bliss is to always be a beginner on the path. Never become an expert. If you're going to go out and learn tennis and you've never played it before, and someone hands you a racket, and they say, now, try a drop shot this way. You are open. You are willing. I'll do that. Now hit a forehand this way. Now, well, try it this way if you move over here. And now try. The beginner has 1,000 options available to them and will try everything. But if you talk to an expert about how to hit a backhand, they only know one way. Now, that's true not just in tennis. That's true in your business. That's true in your relationships. That's true in everything in your life. Stay a beginner along the path. You can get clogged up, so clogged up with what you know and with the negativity that goes with that and all the rejection, all the judgment that goes with that, because you have to reject all kinds of other points of view in order to make sure that yours is the only one that ever gets heard or ever gets used, that you don't have any room inside of you for something new and something exciting and something different and expanding yourself and so on. So be wary of experts, especially if you're one yourself. Be wary of yourself becoming one, because then you limit yourself. And by limiting yourself, your bliss, your purpose, which is there, can't find you. It's like an artery that's clogged up with cholesterol. Nothing can flow through it because it's too clogged. You've got to unclog yourself. And the way you unclog yourself is by opening yourself up and advancing confidently and doing things that make sense to you, that make you feel good, that are of service to others, that are useful to other people, whatever it is that you're doing.
Are my wishes in alignment with my highest self? This principle invites you to choose which possibility you identify with and to live as if it had already occurred. If you place into your imagination wishes that are misaligned with your highest God-realized self, you will find yourself frustrated and immobilized. God is love. If your aspirations in any way are outside of this mantra, you will feel lost and you will not succeed. If God is one, then God is incapable of being divided. If your desires involve conflict for yourself or anyone else, then you have brought two into the picture. That is yourself, as well as the second party who might be harmed by the fulfillment of your wish. God being only oneness wherein all things are connected, and God, your highest self, being love, cannot even recognize the dichotomy that you bring to the picture. If God acknowledged a desire that would bring harm to anyone, God wouldn't and couldn't be God. How could that which is all one recognize two, which is needed in order to have conflict, and still be God? This is what happens when you attempt to manifest from a place of selfishness or potential harm to anyone else. You invoke the ego, which is always about winning, overpowering, being better than others, accumulating for the sake of feeling superior, achieving for adulation or recognition, improving your status, and so on. And again, ego is edging God out. I love the way Neville speaks to this point. Quote, "You never draw out of the deep of yourself that which you want. You always draw that which you are, and you are that which you feel yourself to be, as well as that which you feel is true of others." Unquote. So in this manifestation activity, the secret is to feel yourself as already being and having what you desire, and to keep the entirety of it all wrapped up in a spirit of love. By all means, place into your imagination the idea of living a prosperous life. But this in no way implies from a God-realized position that you desire a fancy watch, a luxury automobile, a large infusion of cash, a palatial home, or anything else that is for the purpose of elevating your position among your peers. This immediately involves conflict, two-ness, you and those who you are attempting to impress with your being in some way superior. Staying aligned with your source of being means no one is in any way better than anyone else, regardless of the monetary value of their stuff. Can you ask out of love, live and feel as if what you desire is already a present fact, and then allow the universal source of all to provide with no concern about appeasing the demands of your ego? If demanding and insisting is your style, do it from a place of pure love. Be willing to give it all away in the name of that love. Stay in that place of pure humility. If you desire to purify your body and live from a disease-free place of perfect health, simply assume the feeling of love throughout your body and live as if it were your reality. Not to impress others, not to have special privileges bestowed upon you because you are more special and thus more deserving of this healing, but purely out of your humble sense of gratitude for being in a state of well-being. Albert Einstein once famously observed that all he wanted to do was learn to think like God thinks. This means living and manifesting from a place of all-encompassing desire to serve others, to be love, to ask nothing in return for what you give. In other words, to simply be love. Get your ego out of the picture and draw out of the deep of yourself, as Neville expresses it. And the deep of yourself is truly your highest self, which is, of course, God. Let the God that you are, the God that Jesus said you are, the God that is your very essence, your deepest self, let this be the energy you draw upon to fill your imagination. And then, know that you are fully aligned with the only source that is responsible for all of creation. As you begin to see your divinely aligned manifestations show up in your physical world, think like God thinks, and share any munificence with others with no expectation of anything back, including even a thank you if it's not forthcoming. As you place your intentions into your imagination and assume the feeling of those intentions being fulfilled, ask not for anything that is outside the great umbrella of love that is God. Lao Tzu, some 6 centuries or so earlier, reminds you that the great sage is kind to the kind and kind to the unkind, because kindness is his nature. If you can make your desires harmonize with the messages of the above passage while practicing humility and keeping your ego at bay, you will come to see the truth in Neville's observation that, quote, you never draw out of the deep of yourself that which you want. You always draw that which you are, unquote. The key here is the deep of yourself. That is your highest self.
So I was finishing up the collection run, and I saw a couple that I recognized over the years, and there was a woman, and she was having difficulty with her luggage, and I just said to her, "Oh, here, let me help you with that." And she gave me a real harsh look and said, "No, I don't want any help." And I said, "Are you sure?" I said, "Because one of her suitcases, she had 2 suitcases, and one was going one direction and the other." I said, "Here, let me help you with that." "I don't want any help from you, especially from you." And it gave me that real harsh.
Wow.
Okay. So this happened an hour ago. and so it's like, and I have no idea what prompted. This is just someone I've just seen around the place where I live once in a while. It's a building where a lot of people live. And so the reason I bring it up is because at the moment that something like this occurs, when you encounter, someone who's hostile towards you, or who's sending you an ugly message, or there's any number of endless reasons about why that might be taking place. It might have to do with something that I did or said or whatever that I'm not even aware of. It might have something to do with something that's going on in this person's life at this particular time. It could be her husband was walking with her, and he said, "Don't take that personally." And I was thinking about the 4 agreements. Have you ever read the 4 agreements?
Sure, Don Miguel.
Yeah, do you remember
It's a
which
classic.
one I'm speaking about? Which one of those agreements? He said,
I don't know.
I don't want to give you a test here on the air. But one of the agreements was, don't take anything personally, And I was just thinking about what Don Miguel had said in that book about not taking things personally, because so often when we encounter someone who's what we might consider rude or unpleasant or unhappy or whatever it is, the first thing that we want to do is just take it personally, say, "She has no right to talk to me like that, and how dare you, and I'm going to find out what's going on," and or whatever it might, or just go around in a morose kind of way. And it's what I'm talking about, even when I'm talking about watching that movie and being a different person watching that movie, or reading the life and teachings of the Masters of the Far East 25 years after I purchased it, and having it have something totally new for me. And my reaction to this woman talking in this fashion to me just an hour ago or so was very different than it was even for me even a decade or so, or maybe even a few months ago, before I immersed myself in preparation for this seminar that I'm going to be doing on the 24th and 25th of this month, called I Am Light. That I reminded myself that I am light, and that when you have a choice to be right or to be kind, that it's really important to be able to choose kind. And so rather than being right and saying, well, how dare anybody talk to me like that? And I have, I didn't do anything to her, and she's just, instead my immediate reaction was to push that kind of, subconscious mind training that I've had, over the years, to react with hostility or hurt or pain or frustration or whatever whenever you encounter what you might consider to be unpleasant or rude behavior in something, is to come from a place of kindness. And I was just thinking to myself how happy I was in the last hour that I didn't walk around wondering and being hurt by and being upset, but instead was just thinking about this woman and just trying to send her as much love as I possibly can, and hope that whatever it is that would motivate her to react in that way to an attempted act of kindness, that it gets soothed and it gets happy, that she becomes happy. And I think if I send energy to her, that would be it just represents a kind of growth thing for me as a person. And if we can, as I speak to all of you out there all over the world, when you encounter any kind of behavior, that don't be one of those kind of people who's looking for an occasion to be offended, and consequently then be emotionally upset, and then consequently attract more of what you don't want in your life. And I think that's the essence of what Abraham was speaking to me about in this new product that we have, this book and DVD and CD called Co-Creating at Its Best, that you want the law of attraction is always working. And if you put your thoughts on what you don't like or what you're unhappy about or what makes you angry, then you're going to align with an energy that is going to offer you experiences that match up to exactly what it is that you're thinking, so that every moment of your life, regardless of what it is that's coming at you, you have a choice. And this woman, for me, was a great reminder that I'm growing, and that I can be applying this not just in this kind of an event, but I can be applying it in all kinds of places all over my world, including all of the negativity and things that are taking place. For example, what is taking place in Paris over the weekend at the satirical, at Charlie Hebdo, is that how you say it?
Hebdo.
And what was going on, and to not fill my heart and my head with all kinds of antipathy and vituperative thoughts about all the Muslims in the world and being angry at them, as I'm hearing so many people, and instead just working at we're never going to solve these problems of anger and hostility, which in a personal way show up in the event that I had when trying to help a woman with her luggage, but when they're extended into a larger and larger perspective, and the solution is going to be in finding a place where all of us can send love, where our hearts are so filled with rage and hate toward so many people.
We grow up believing in so many limitations that after a while our lives actually manifest those limitations. We hear ourselves saying things that we accept as truth, when in fact they are misbeliefs that have turned into our truths. Here are 5 of those myths or misbeliefs that permeate our culture. 1. I can't help the way I am. I've always been this way. If you find yourself believing that you must always be the way you've always been, you are arguing against growth. You must shed the illusion that you cannot help the way you are. You must create a knowing within you that you have the power to create whatever kind of person you want to become in all aspects of your humanity. 2. It's my nature. I inherited who I am, and it can't be changed. To enter the realm of real magic, you will have to suspend such thoughts and become a spiritual being first, a being who has no limitations in the inner domain where boundaries are non-existent. 3. My personality is controlled by my chemistry and metabolism. This is a lie we hear over and over again, and it is repeated in some of the most prestigious circles, making it even more difficult to overcome. While scientists may in fact have a point about body chemistry, what they too often fail to address is what kind of control we have over our own body. Our body chemistry is always being affected by how we choose to think. I want you to take a look at the enormous power that you have in your mind for containing those enzymes or retraining them to work for you rather than against you. Here's misbelief number 4. My family is responsible for my personality. These kinds of pronouncements are the very sort of inner thoughts that will keep you from ever allowing miraculous changes to take place in your personality. You must know within that you not only have a choice today, but you have always had a choice concerning how you react to the influences of your family. The choice is always yours. Know that your family and your role within your family influence you today to the extent that you believe that they do. You must become the producer, director, and actor in the unfolding story of your life. 5. I can't escape my culture and times. If you believe that the culture determines who you are and what kind of a person you will turn out to be, then that will be your reality. On the other hand, everyone who has ever made a difference in the world has been an innovator. An innovator looks within and allows their conscience and commitment to a purpose decide who they will become. If you're going to follow your bliss and make a difference in the world, you will soon learn that you cannot follow the herd. Once again, it boils down to personal responsibility and a willingness to consult your own spiritual awareness, that higher invisible self that flows through you. As you think, so shall you be. These are the big 5 misbeliefs that make up the big lie that was thrust upon you from your earliest moments of consciousness. You must begin a program to overcome these illusions. As you now know, this entire program of creating miracles revolves around one single premise, that you become in the physical world that which you create in your invisible world. Here are the 6 keys to making yourself into the person that you choose for the purpose of fulfilling your heroic mission here. 1 is your personality. Create a fantasy in your mind and imagine exactly how you would like to be. Would you like to be more assertive, more loving and gentle, less anxious and nervous? For now, just know that all of these inner imaginings can be translated into physical behavior, for that is precisely what you've been doing all along anyway. Secondly, your talent. Just for a moment, visualize the optimal talent that you would like to have. Your choice to excel in any given area will be based upon your own personal interests. Your talent, like everything else about you, is a function of the invisible force that flows through your body. It is not in your hands, your genes, or any part of your physical apparatus. It is in the force that flows through all of your being. When you begin to know rather than doubt your talent, you will discover the necessary physical abilities to carry out your purpose. Third is your intelligence. How smart would you like to be? Would it take a miracle for you to be smarter intellectually than you already are? You are as capable as you need to be to fulfill your purpose. Your intelligence is infinite. Almost 20 years ago, I redefined intelligence in your erroneous zones. A truer barometer of intelligence is an effective, happy life lived each day and each present moment of every day. You are a genius. You can improve your arithmetic and reading skills. You can learn anything that you put your mind to. You are a spiritual being first and foremost, and you cannot put a number on that. Fourth, your habits and customs. Would you like to be able to change some of the things that you find yourself doing repeatedly, but which do not serve you any longer? Use your magical powers of inner persuasion to challenge everything about yourself. Your personality is made up of the hundreds of habitual ways that you conduct the daily physical affairs of your life. You can change around your daily humdrum habits and get yourself fully involved in life, regardless of your income level or circumstances. Circumstances do not make a man. They reveal him, as James Allen reminded us in As a Man Thinketh. Learning to think in non-habitual ways is the essence of overcoming personality traits that no longer serve you. Fifthly, your aging. Imagine for yourself the ultimate miracle, a slowing down, or even an elimination of the aging process. The way out of this trap, the real magic that is available to you, is located, as is everything else, in your invisible self, your mind. You can absolutely refuse to let an old person into your body. If you can work your mind in a genuinely magical sense, you can strongly affect the aging process of the cells composed of indestructible DNA. It is in your mind where that invisible intelligence works its magic that you must examine your attitudes towards aging. Do you think old thoughts? You can begin to rethink how you feel about having your individual cells deteriorate. And if you use your mind in a new way to develop a new knowing within, perhaps you will be able to affect that process that you have come to think of as inescapable. Your emotional health is another area. Your emotions are physical manifestations of your thoughts. The joy you experience is located in your physical body, and the chemicals that are present when you experience elation can be identified and quantified. You manufacture those chemicals in your own quantum pharmacy that begins with your mind. When you begin to heal the inner you and consult that inner voice constantly, you literally begin to alter your immune system. Emotions show up in your body as physical manifestations of your thoughts. Keep this in mind as we head toward the path of real magic. The sage emulates the natural philanthropy of the Tao, and all of his needs are fulfilled in the process. The ego is a demanding force that's never satisfied. It constantly requires that we seek more money, more power, more acquisitions, more glory, more prestige to provide the fuel that it thinks it must have. But living a Tao-centered life rather than an ego-centered one removes us from the rat race, as it offers inner peace and satisfying fulfillment. This is what I believe the wisdom of this verse of the Tao Te Ching is saying for the 21st century. First, make an attempt to reverse ego's hold on you by practicing the Tao's teaching to serve the needs of others, and all your own needs will be fulfilled. Generously thinking of and serving others will lead to matching your behaviors with the perpetual rhythm of the Tao. Then its power will flow freely, leading to a fulfilling life. Ego wants the opposite, however, as it tells you to think of yourself first and get yours before someone else beats you to it. The main problem with listening to ego is that you're always caught in the trap of striving and never arriving. Thus you can never feel complete. As you reach out in thoughts and behaviors, you activate loving energy, which is synonymous with giving. I see the sacred, invisible source of all in its eternal state of giving and asking nothing in return. I vow to be this too in my thoughts and in my behaviors. When you're tempted to focus on your personal successes and defeats, shift your attention in that very moment to a less fortunate individual. You'll feel connected to life as well as more satisfied than when you're dwelling on your own circumstances. Imagine what it would be like if you dismissed ego's hold on you, serving others, and watching how all that you give returns to you tenfold. The poet Hafiz expresses this attitude perfectly. Quote, "Everyone is God speaking. Why not be polite and listen to him?" Unquote. And secondly, stop the chase and be a witness. The more you pursue desires, the more they'll elude you. Try letting life come to you and begin to notice the clues that what you crave is on its way. You're in a constant state of receiving because of the ceaseless generosity of the eternal Tao. The air you breathe, the water you drink, the food you eat, the sunshine that warms you, the nutrients that keep your body alive, and even the thoughts that fill your mind are all gifts from the eternal Tao. Stay appreciative of all that you receive, knowing that it flows from an all-providing source. Stop the chase and become a witness. Soothe your demanding habits by refusing to continue running after more. By letting go, you let God. And even more significantly, you become more like God and less like the ego, with its lifetime practice of edging God out, E-G-O. Extend your perspective beyond the sensory level. Your inner conviction knows that a rose is more than a flower, as it offers a pleasant fragrance and velvety petals. Use that knowing to perceive the creative invisible force that brings an intricate blooming miracle from nowhere to now here. Experience the essence of the Creator who allowed this blossoming masterpiece to emerge from a tiny seed. Note that the seed arrived from what we can only refer to as the world of formless nothingness or spirit. See that spirit animating the colors, the scents and textures, and look at all of life from a transcendent perspective. You'll be less inclined to join the chase and more inclined to live from the inner conviction that your true essence is not of this world. Discontinue pressuring yourself to perpetually accumulate more. Let others be consumed with the chase if they choose to, while you learn to relax. Rather than focusing outward, turn inward. Cultivate awe and appreciation as inner touchstones rather than an outer determination for more adoration and accumulation. When you see a beautiful sight, or hear an enchanting sound, or taste a mouth-watering delicacy, allow yourself to think of the miracle within these sensory pleasures. Be like the master who prefers what is within to what is without. Allow things to come and go without any urgency to become attached to this ephemeral world of comings and goings. Do the Tao now. Be on the lookout for ego demands for an entire day. Decide to diffuse as many of them as you can comfortably, perhaps by assigning them an intensity grade. Living beyond ego situations that are easy to accomplish gets a low number, while those requests that are difficult to quell get a higher number. For example, let's say that your mate drives right on by, or you watch him or her take a different route than you ordinarily do. Silently witness the degree of discomfort with your decision not to say anything. Did ego let you know its preference? Or if you have a conversational opportunity to display your specialized knowledge or describe a situation where you were the recipient of honor or success, note how uncomfortable your decision to remain quiet felt. Again, did ego let you know its preference? As Lao Tzu says in this verse, quote, "Through selfless action, fulfillment is attained. By holding back ego's demands, even for a few moments, you'll feel more and more fulfilled." Unquote.
Every single one of these are something that I know you've used, or if you haven't, you're living with someone who does. So here are the top 18. First one, if I want to change, it's going to be difficult. Change is difficult. It's a meme. Whether it's true or not, we're going to examine a little bit later. It's going to be risky. In other words, if I were to do this and try this, whatever it might be, make these changes, it's going to involve risk. It's a meme. It's a mind virus. It's going to take a long time. You know, it's taken me 40 years to become this way, and I've been living this way, so it's going to take me another 40 years. Well, you don't have 40 years. You know? But nevertheless, it's going to take a long time. If I were to do and live the kind of life that I would like to live, there's going to be family drama. There's going to be people out there, aunts and uncles and in-laws and people. They're going to, if I wanted to move to Montana or if I wanted to take up a new career, there's going to be huge family drama. Total meme. Whether it's true, mostly unlikely, unless you decide that that's what you want your life to be. I don't deserve it. A meme. How could there be anything out there in this world that you don't deserve? You are a piece of God. How could the source, how could God create something, anyone that isn't deserving of all of the abundance and all of the prosperity and all of the love that comes from the source? It's not my nature. Your nature is a meme. The idea that that you're shy because you can't do anything about that. It's not my nature. I can't afford it. This is one of my all-time favorites, and I'll deal with it a little bit later in the program. The idea that you can't afford to do something is one of the largest mind viruses that have been placed upon you, and it's something that I would urge you to never say again, that you can't afford to do something. Do not ever allow money to be a reason why you don't fulfill your dharma, your destiny, and what you're here to do. And I can tell you, coming from the background that I came from, living in foster homes, living on the east side of Detroit and working my way through everything that I've had, that I've never, ever, ever thought that I couldn't afford to do anything, including go to the university and pay my own way and whatever. Are you listening, my children out there? No one will help me. How many times you've heard people say, I'd like to do that, but there's no help out there. I just can't, nobody's out there. There's 6 billion people on the planet. They're all waiting to help somebody. Almost all of them want to help you with what it is that you want to do, unless you carry around this mind virus that says, I'm all alone and I can't do anything about it. It's just a meme. It's never happened before. So because something has never happened before is exactly the perfect reason why it'll probably happen the next time, unless you have that mind virus. I'm not strong enough. You know, I'm too weak to do what I would really like to be able to do. It's a meme. I'm not smart enough. You're all geniuses. Every single one of you. You're all genius. You've just let yourself become de-geniused by life. You know, I have a son-in-law, his name is Joe. He didn't go to college, but he came over and put a wood floor in our house that is so beautiful. He spent several weeks on it, getting down on his hands and knees, measuring everything, and he walks on it. If I had to do that wooden floor myself, it would never have gotten done, because he can do that, and there's other things that I can do. He wouldn't want to be up here giving this talk. Maybe he would. But everybody has within them a genius and should never tell themselves, I'm not smart enough. And it's something you would never, ever want to convey to your kids. The rules won't let me. So that the rules ought not to be reasons why you do or don't do anything. One of my great teachers, Henry David Thoreau, reminded us about the importance, not the importance, the necessity of civil disobedience. That all these rules that we have, you know, when my mom, my beautiful mom, was born in 1916, she was 4 years old before women even got to vote in America. And the women, I mean, half the population of our country was not involved in any decision making in the first almost 200 years of our history. How absurd that is when we think about it now. And how did that change? Because people said, the hell with those rules. I don't care whether it's legal or not legal. If it's not moral and I have rules within me, I have to go to those. These are means. I don't have the energy. I'm too tired. It's a mean. One of the commitments I made, and my kids have never heard me say it, is that I'm tired. It's a word that I stopped saying in my early 20s, because I used to hear people talking about that all the time. I'm so tired, I'm so tired. And the minute that you tell yourself that you're tired, your body begins to react to the thought that you are programming it to be. So if nothing else, just stop saying it. And, well, I'll get onto that later. My own personal family history is the reason why. You know, I'm the middle child. I mean, what do you expect from me? And no wonder I'm confused. I don't know what I'm up. Oh, I'm the youngest child. I'm the youngest child. No wonder people are always telling me what to do, and I just wait for somebody to tell me. Or I'm the oldest child. No wonder I have a superiority complex. I've been telling people what to do since I was born. I had to, so on. Or my parents were divorced when I was 4 years old, and that's why I can't get ahead in my life. It's a meme, and we hear this. So much of therapeutic talk is just convincing people about what they can't do, about what their excuses are, telling them because this happened to you when you were a child. Everything that happened to you as a child had to happen. The evidence for that? It did. And if it did, then you either deal with it and move on with it and learn from it, or you use it as an excuse. And I've used that over and over in my own life as well. And it's something that you want to take a real hard look at. I'm too busy. The final two were the most frequently cited. I'm too busy. And I'm scared. It just frightens me. I live in fear. The Course in Miracles says there are only two emotions in this world: fear and love. Fear, everything that is fear cannot be love. Everything that is love cannot be fear. So you must hear an awful lot of talk on the television and reading the newspapers and so on about all the things that we have to be afraid of. You don't want to live in a place of fear.
What are your visions of yourself? You see, all of this business about if you get tired. How many of you get tired? You don't have to get tired.
I don't get tired. When it's time to go to sleep, there's no insomnia in my life, and there doesn't have to. Insomnia is one more of those things where you start telling yourself, I'm not going to be able to sleep. Look, you've been out, you're partying, you're at a convention, you're in New Orleans, get into bed, let's say, and it's 2 o'clock, and you know you got to get up at 6. You look at your watch. All right, it's 2 o'clock. 3 o'clock? 4 o'clock. 5 o'clock? 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. If I were to fall asleep right this second, and I'm not even close, all right, I'd only get 4 hours of sleep. Here it comes. Ready? Great imagery now. Boy, am I going to be tired tomorrow. Whew! Oh, I'm going to be tired. That'll keep you awake for at least an hour, all right? Your body just kind of goes, oh, my God, and you start interfering with it. Your mind starts programming you, all right? Now, an hour later, you look at your watch and say, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. 3 hours. Now you upgrade your neurotic expectations for yourself. I'm going to be a zombie tomorrow. And then when you get out of bed and the alarm goes off, if you sleep, what do? You start counting backwards now. 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock. You put your body instantly on droop. Kind of put your eyes sort of on bag. Don't expect anything out of me today. I didn't get any sleep last night or whatever. Until someone comes along halfway through the day and says, you know, we got a game tonight and we're going to go out and have a few drinks and we're going to, hey, that's great. Yeah, I think I'd like to do that. It's a choice.
You ever notice how tired you get when you got something unpleasant to do? You know, you look at the lawn equipment and look at the roller and the edger. I'm going to lie down for 3 or 4 months. I'm really tired. It's a choice. If you just tell yourself, I don't need to think tired thoughts. When I tell you that the kind of visualization I'm talking about can end asthma, asthma is an easy one. Anybody who's suffered with asthma, and I've had a stepson who's had it, he holds on to it and he believes it and he wants to hang on to it, and that's it. He's going to have asthma until he doesn't want it anymore. And I tell him that and he just gets mad because he wants to hold on to his asthma. And he gets a lot of attention for it, and he gets a lot of people to remind him that he's sickly and that he can't do this and do that. And so he gets a lot of positive sort of affirmation for his negative reaction. I have seen people eliminate a lot more than asthma. When people ask me, what kind of a therapist are you? Where do you fit in? You know, are you a behaviorist? Are you a rational emotive therapist? Are you Freudian psychoanalyst? I call myself a do-do therapist. And I really mean that. A do-do therapist is someone who believes in the great secrets of the universe. One of the great secrets that you'll read in Icus is that I hear and I forget. I see and I remember. I do and I understand. And not one moment before. I mean, not one of you who knows how to swim by watching somebody else do it or listening to somebody else give you instruction. You know how to swim because you got in the water and you flop around and you fill your mouth up a few times and then eventually you do it. And you know something? What do you think is the difference in your physical skills between the moment before when you couldn't swim and the moment afterwards when you did let go and could swim for the first time? You think your physical skills are any different? They're exactly the same. We all know how to swim. Now you believe you can. And when you believe you can, you just do it. You just do it. And if you can't ride a bicycle, there's a woman who came to me and said, I can't ride a bicycle. My parents wouldn't let me. My mother would never let me get on a bicycle when I was a little kid. And I had these big white teeth and she was afraid I would break them. And I said, okay, that's great. Let's go. She said, go? Where are we going? She wanted to sit in the office. I said, I've got a bicycle downstairs in the garage, and we'll just go on, and I'm going to teach you how to ride a bike. You think I'm paying these kind of prices to come here and have you teach me how to ride a bicycle? I want to know why I can't. He said, oh, well, you didn't say that. That'll take another 30 seconds. You can't because you never got on one. And as soon as you do, and are willing to fail and fall down a few times, then you'll know how to ride it. And until that, you can blame Mama forever. But it isn't going to change a thing. If you want to change something in your life, if you want to quit smoking, you don't need to go to the shit clinic. You don't need to go and poke holes in your cigarettes, so you get a hernia, trying to get that nicotine down into your lungs, and a little bit less each time. And they have now a thing out called poo-poo spray. I don't know if you've seen this, but it smells like poo-poo, all right? And you spray it on your fingers so that every time you go, oh, no, I won't be having any of those today, no. Now, you don't have to do that. What you do is, the first thing you do is you see yourself as an ex-smoker. You just see that. You visualize yourself there, and you take credit for having such a wonderful picture of yourself. You do that first. And then the second thing you do is you tell yourself how easy this is going to be. This isn't hard. There's nothing difficult about quitting smoking. You just do it. You just don't put cigarettes in your mouth one day at a time. That's what you do. And you don't tell yourself, I'm going to want them, I'm going to get fat, and all of these kind of, you don't do that. You stop the blame. And you do it. You want to lose weight. You see yourself looking the way you want to look instead of going on a diet. Everybody I know on a diet is fat. And if you change the way you see yourself, then when you've eaten enough, you stop. You just see yourself in a different way. You stop that. No, I don't want any more. You say, I think I'll exercise a little more. I'm going to go out and I'm going to do some kind of exercise. I'm going to walk. I'm going to get myself on an exercise bike. I'm going to go to a dance class. I see myself this way. Now I'm just going to act out on that instead of saying, oh, it's so hard to quit. It's just so hard to lose weight. I'm so depressed. I think I'll have some candy as soon as I get over that, you know. And I had a person come up to me after a talk one time and said, Dr. Dyer, you mean to tell me you never get depressed, ever? I said, of course not. She says, oh, that's depressing. Oh, that depresses me even more. You see, it depends on how you see yourself.